Hey there, Mr. Terry, high school history teacher. Welcome back to another History Teacher X video. All right, we're heading back to one of the fun channels that we cover from serious history. This video is called Most Epic Revenge Stories in History. This would be great. Everyone loves a good revenge story. As always, I'll try to add some more history to it. Original video, link down below as always. Let's get started. All right, who's going to be first?
Today we're going over more extreme revenge stories from history. Peter I of Portugal. It's 1340, and Peter, the son of the King of Portugal, is unexcitedly awaiting the arrival of his future bride. This marriage wasn't one Peter was looking forward to. In fact, this was all his father, King Alfonso's idea. See, at the time, Portugal was a relatively small kingdom that shared a border with Castile, a large and powerful nation. Understanding it was probably better to make friends and not enemies, Alfonso negotiated a deal to have his son marry the daughter of a powerful Castilian noble. The contract...
Not uncommon. It's how monarchies grow. You ever wonder how people get power? They know other popular, famous people. It's not rocket science.
A deal to have his son marry the daughter of a powerful Castilian noble. The contracts were signed, and the king felt great that his son's marriage would help keep his kingdom safe and secure.
Sure.
Never in 1,000 years could he imagine what would happen next. The royal procession from Castile arrives, and out steps the most beautiful woman Peter had ever seen.
That's the thing. They're all going to be... Because, you know, with these arranged marriages, they're always going to be like, gosh, I hope they're good looking. They're good looking. By the way, if they aren't and not really compatible or into each other that way, just remember there's plenty of concubines to support those other needs of monarchs. King and queen alike, by the way.
His jaw hits the floor and he can't stop staring. Caramba, she is stunning, a total 10 out of 10 baddie, and the future king instantly falls madly in love. But there was just one problem. The woman he was staring at was actually not his bride. She is a woman named Inês de Castro, his future wife's lady in waiting. His real fiancée, Constanza, exits the carriage next and approaches Peter to introduce herself. She's nice and all, but as hard as the prince tries to focus on the woman who would soon be his queen, he just can't take his eyes off Inês.
You learn to love, right? Again, I told you, all the monarchs have side chicks and side dudes, so this other woman, get very familiar with her if he wants to. Be part of the job description as the lady in waiting.
Peter and Constanza get married to fulfill the contract signed by their fathers, and they go on to have a very unhappy marriage. The entire time, Peter is not so secretly hooking up with Inês, and rumors of their affair quickly spread through the court. Constanza grows increasingly frustrated with her husband's infidelity.
So they only care about that if you're not part of that monarchy. You don't like it if you're the other family. So it makes sense if you're the side chick. That's the one they don't like.
And eventually, she tries to get him to name Inês the godmother to one of her children. This was something that in that period would basically make the affair incestuous.
Ooh.
But that child died within a week of birth, so Inês dodged that bullet.
Not uncommon. I think you guys know. Old days. Very common. It wasn't until really the Industrial Revolution era where infant mortality really started to drop. But yeah, you could lose, 20% of your children don't make it to adolescence. It's really sad. And then, of course, the hyper increase of women that die in childbirth. One of the modern miracles of medicine and understanding simple things like, hey, the doctors that birth the child should actually wash their hands. Basic stuff.
As frustrated as Constanza was with Peter, his father, Alfonso, was even more upset. His stupid son couldn't keep it in his pants, and now his affair was putting the entire kingdom at risk. See, an important detail in this story is that Inés's brothers were powerful, but now exiled Castilian noblemen who quickly befriended Peter when he started hooking up with their sister. Peter started to give them important roles in his court, and Alfonso worried that his idiot son might get dragged into some Castilian political war. The king starts trying to banish Inês from Portugal, sending her to various regions in the Iberian Peninsula.
Oh, really?
But his son just spends all of his time writing letters to her. In the end, all of his efforts to break up his son and side chick fail, and Alfonso's forced to keep Inês closer to him in Lisbon to keep an eye on both of them. Constanza dies in 1349 due to complications from childbirth. Peter is still performing his royal duties of making new heirs, by the way. And when this happens, Peter is overjoyed. Finally, he can officially marry Inês and live happily ever after. But King Alfonso is having none of it. He banishes Inês to Coimbra and explicitly forbids Peter from marrying her. Peter unsurprisingly tells his dad to shove it and follows Inês to Coimbra, where they live together and have 4 children. Alfonso is now at his wits' end. These illegitimate heirs could one day try to make a claim for the throne. And
it seems like the common fantasy trope or whatever of like, it's the woman, the woman's father that wants to break up the relationship, not dad, right? I mean, you would think Alfonso would just want to try to marry into another royal family.
Wits' end. These illegitimate heirs could one day try to make a claim for the throne, and Portugal could spiral into a civil war. Enough was enough.
Oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. And he's afraid of that these other people, these other Castilians, I guess, are the ones that could be a threat to the Portuguese throne. Is that more about that? Doesn't like the brothers of Inês. They're going to use this whole relationship to try to get political power.
Inês had been nothing but trouble since she arrived 15 years ago. His son must choose Portugal or this woman. And so, Alfonso hatches a plan to ensure Peter picks correctly. In 1355, King Alfonso sends 3 men to Coimbra. They find Inês in a monastery, and in front of her young children, they cut off her head and leave. Peter returns and finds the love of his life dead, and he is destroyed. He cries loudly, overwhelmed by feelings of grief and guilt for not being able to protect her. But soon his tears burn hot with hatred and anger towards his father. Peter raises an army and begins attacking and terrorizing areas in northern Portugal. In his efforts to prevent a future civil war, the king had accidentally caused exactly what he had feared. The forces of Peter and Alfonso fought for nearly the entire year.
I didn't know the story, by the way.
Peter loses.
My Portuguese history really starts a little bit later, mostly in the Age of Exploration is when I think start to understand a little bit more. So this is totally new to me. This is wild. This is a movie right here.
Alfonso fought for nearly the entire year, and in the end, Peter loses. His mother, the queen, is able to negotiate a truce between father and son, but the prince never forgives his father. 2 years later, Alfonso dies, and Peter becomes the new king of Portugal. He immediately orders that the men who murdered Inês be captured and brought to him. The assassins are hunted for years until 2 of them are finally apprehended in Castile in 1361. The 2 assassins are dragged before Peter, and with contempt in his eyes, the king stares at the men who killed his beloved Inês. The men are put on trial in public and found guilty. As punishment, Peter orders their hearts to be ripped out while they are still alive. Some sources say,
feed him to Kali Ma. Dude, that's like Indiana Jones. Kali Ma. Temple of Doom gets too much hate, by the way.
That he himself participated in the execution, screaming, "You have done the same to my heart!" What usually comes next in this story is apocryphal, meaning it may not have actually happened, but it is said that Peter then declared to the crowd that he had married Inês before she died, and that she was his rightful queen. He has Inés's body exhumed, dresses her corpse in the finest clothing, and places her on the throne. Lovingly staring at the remains of his mistress, he crowns Inês the Queen of Portugal.
Okay, wait, how long has she been dead? I mean, I don't care how long. It's horrifying every possible way that you would do this. Dude, you're going to have to let her go. This isn't helping anything. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help her memory. No.
He then forces every single nobleman to swear his loyalty to his queen by kissing her rotting hand. Following this coronation story, which may or may not be true, Peter then had Inês entombed in the Alcobaça monastery. In his final will, Peter orders that when his time comes, he also be laid to rest there with Inês. Inscribed in the marble of his tomb are the words, Até o fim do mundo, until the end of the world. And that is where they both are to this very day.
It's kind of a cute story, I'm not going to lie, you know what I mean? It seems like he could have been almost more vengeful with the power that he had. I mean, he had a civil war and then had a peaceful treaty with his father. You think he would be the one that would just be, I don't know, going even more so, trying to be the one to rip his heart out. God, that was tragic. All right, Shi Jianqiao.
Shi Jianqiao. The early half of the 20th century was a time of complete chaos in China. In 1912, due to political pressures, the 6-year-old Qing Emperor Puyi abdicated his throne, officially ending the 268-year-old dynasty.
So, see, Shi, the empress before, had died, and they were already kind of moving towards, they were going to abolish the dynasty anyways. I mean, this kid was technically the ruler, but they were always going to, this was always going to be kind of the time they were going to be shifting to the republic, which is what's going to happen here. End of dynastic rule, one of the longest institutions in history in China. Goes back to the BC era, just this steady line with a few usurpers throughout the process. But the dynastic cycle, man, one of the greatest continuities in civilizational history.
Within just 4 years, the country that was once the most powerful nation in Asia devolved into a land of constant violence, with areas governed by regional warlords fighting for control over the now toothless government in Beijing.
Very common thing with when the dynasties break down. It descends into feudalism, feudal warlords. So basically local leaders get loyalty from people around them, and then that's the structure. And then this is a part of the cycle that collapses like this. One of these warlords ends up unifying everything, usually by force, get peasant rebellions going, stuff like that. So, what happened here was not all that different to what had happened through thousands of years of Chinese history. The difference here, though, is that the republic is going to be declared, which in itself will also be very weak and not really last that long. Going to get a civil war again. Then you get old Mao.
This era is known today as the Warlord Era, and amidst the mayhem, a young woman would make history when she set out on a decade-long quest to avenge the death of her father. It's the 1920s, and Shi Gulan is a college student in Tianjin. Unlike most people who were suffering greatly in the Warlord Era, Gulan's life had taken quite the opposite turn. Her father, Shi Kongbin, had enlisted in the local military, and he quickly rose through the ranks. By 1925, he had gone from being the son of a simple farmer and tofu seller to a brigade general serving a powerful warlord aligned with the Fengxian clique.
And still serving tofu.
His family, including Shi Gulan, had in the process gained the status and prestige that came with such a rank. Everything was going great until a second war broke out between the Fengxian and Zhuli cliques that changed her life forever. By October of 1925, the Fengxian had defeated the Zhuli, but a military governor named Sun Chuanfang had used the opportunity to seize control of his area, becoming a very powerful warlord himself. Shi Kongbin is deployed with a brigade of mercenaries to capture a city in Chuanfang's territory, and things initially go well for him. But during the battle, he and his men are caught off guard by a sneak attack led by the warlord himself. Kongbin's forces,
dude, everyone just has cool hats. Kind of jealous.
Are quickly overwhelmed, and he is taken hostage. The following day, he is tied up and brought to a local train station. A crowd gathers, and Chuanfang orders his prisoner decapitated. Kongbin's head is paraded around the station on a bamboo pike and then displayed for all to see. News of her father's death reaches the young Shi Gulan, and she initially mourns the loss of her father. But soon her tears of sadness burn her cheeks, and she is consumed by anger. This warlord had not just killed her father, by displaying his head, he had dishonored his entire family. How could anyone tolerate such disrespect? She swears that she will stop at nothing to avenge her father and restore her family's honor.
This again sounds like such a movie too. Maybe it has been made. It's just gonna go through. Here comes the training montage. She's got to go seek some kind of martial arts master. Schemes for 10 years to come back. It's like the Count of Monte Cristo.
But that would be much easier said than done. See, Chuanfang was now one of the most powerful warlords in China, and Shi Gulan, well, she was a 21-year-old college kid. The thought of a random student assassinating someone that powerful seemed highly improbable. But Gulan had made up her mind. She changes her name to Shi Jianqiao, the Rising Sword, and sets out on a quest for revenge. But before she was able to find Chuanfang, the warlord's life would take the most peculiar turn as well. By 1926, Chinese citizens were sick and tired of the warlord system. A group from the south of China, called the Kuomintang, took advantage of this public sentiment, and they set out on their own quest to defeat every warlord in China to reunite the country.
I said usually that's how this goes. So dynasty breaks apart, warlords take power, and then one unifies them. That's going to be this group. they're going to be the ones to take control and be the ones to control when the Civil War breaks out later on with the communists and Mao Zedong, and be there when the Japanese invade, which is coming up pretty soon.
Whole event called the Northern Expedition probably deserves its own video, but to massively oversimplify the story, the warlords were all defeated by the KMT in about 2.5 years. This didn't really fix the constant fighting in China, but with the warlord system gone, Chuanfang lost everything he had worked for. Left with nothing to show from the last 15 years of being a ruthless warlord general, Chuanfang shaves his head and actually becomes a devout Buddhist. While all that is respectable and all, I guess, Shi Jianqiao didn't get the memo, and she begins tirelessly working to unearth clues to identify and locate her father's killer. For 10 whole years, she chases leads, traveling hundreds of miles searching for Chuanfang, until finally, she finds him in the city of Tianjin. As she watches the former warlord from the shadows, it takes all of her self-control not to end him right then and there. But she had spent a decade of her life in preparation for this moment. She knew that she would only have one shot to take him down, and she could not waste that opportunity. So, instead, she stalks her prey for months, learning his daily routine until finally, she had selected the perfect place to enact her revenge.
The question, too, has got to be, is she wanting to do this, in secret? Or is she one of those assassins you hear from stories? It's like, I don't care. I don't care if I go to jail and I get caught and tried for murder or something. You know what I mean? My life is over, but does she want to be sneaky about it? But it seems like with these type of killings, they want to savor the moment.
On November 13th, 1935, Shi Jianqiao steps into a lay Buddhist hall and, as expected, finds Chuanfang kneeling with his eyes closed, leading a group in the chanting of a sutra. As he continued the recitation, Shi Jianqiao slowly walked directly behind her father's murderer and carefully drew her pistol. She points her weapon at the former warlord and coldly unloads 3 rounds into his head and back. Chuanfang instantly falls dead, and the hall erupts into a panic. But instead of trying to run away, Jianqiao proudly sits next to the dead body and begins to hand out leaflets she had prepared prior to the killing that explained why she did what she had just done. Shi Jianqiao is arrested for murder.
Just so you know, this is what this guy did. He was this horrible warlord. Slander him big time. So yeah, she didn't want to do some secret one and get away with. She wanted to basically suffer the consequences. I don't know, maybe to make it public. Maybe she would get sympathy from the public. I don't know. Yeah, what ends up happening to her? This is another story I did not know.
But the media picks up the story of the killing of Chuanfang, and it instantly divides the people of China.
Yeah, I bet.
The traditionalists see her actions as the ultimate form of filial piety, the Confucian doctrine of love and honor for one's parents.
Right.
While the modernists...
The most important relationship, according to Confucianism, thousands of years ago. You got the 5 relationships, and those relationships are the backbone for a successful society. It was something that rulers used to be a unifying social factor in China for thousands of years. But yeah, utmost respect for your elders, for your parents.
Demand justice and to uphold law and order. Her court case becomes the biggest story of the year and eventually reaches the Supreme Court in Nanjing.
But I mean, she obviously
due to
did
overwhelming public support,
murder.
She was granted a full state pardon, and the killing of Chuanfang was deemed an ethically justifiable act of filial piety.
Whoa, so they were actually able to use filial piety as like a defense? Like killing someone that murders your parents is like justified or like allowed? Is there other precedent for that, or is just kind of a one-off scenario? That's crazy. I mean, again, it shows you how important of a social factor that was, that respect for your parents, that you were literally given a pass to commit murder, preconceived, pre-planned murder. That's crazy. If anyone knows a little bit more about legal justification for this kind of thing, let me know. That's nuts. I got to add that. I'm going to add that to when I talk about filial piety and Confucianism, just as a piece of evidence of, I mean, it's a little bit of probably an outlier of a situation, but at least has some kind of interesting context to add about the importance of that relationship.
Having avenged her father's death, she peacefully lives out the rest of her days and dies in 1979 at the age of 74. Ain Jalut. Okay, this last story completely blew me away.
Okay, we need to get some Mongol action up here, because they're all about revenge. They engage entire wars because of getting revenge of some act.
Because not only was it the first time someone actually stopped the Mongol conquest in its tracks, it's probably one of the craziest movie-like stories of revenge in history. It's 1231, and the once vast and powerful empire known as Khwarezmia lies in complete ruin. As retribution for the disrespect shown to Mongol emissaries by the governor of Otrar, Genghis Khan and his army had invaded the land, killing an estimated 15 million people as they burned entire cities to the ground.
That is one of the craziest revenge stories, too, of the Khwarezmian Empire, what happens to them. There's a reason you probably haven't heard of the Khwarezmian Empire, because they were so utterly devastated, because they had attacked and killed off a Mongol trade convoy. And the Mongols do not deal with that at all. They will annihilate you. But we're going to get into Ain Jalut, though, huh?
Amongst the remnants of the once proud civilization, the Mongols who continued their occupation of the land find a young Khwarezmian prince and sell him to a slave merchant in Egypt. The boy is purchased by the local sultan and is put into training to become a Mamluk, a warrior class of slaves used by the rulers of the Muslim world as elite knights.
And eventually gain political power and basically be the rulers of Egypt, by the way.
The former prince is thrown in with the rest of the slave children and is forced to endure the strictest of training regiments designed to turn boys into hardened men. From a young age, he is thrust into combat against other children, and he is given the name Qutuz, the rabid dog, because he fights like a vicious beast against the other slaves.
By the way, we can obviously see where this is going. This is one of the things that the Mongols used as justification to sometimes just completely wipe out entire noble families, because you get rid of the possibility of them trying to like regain power. So you just wipe them all off. Did that with like the Song Dynasty and other places.
Qutuz rises through the ranks and eventually becomes the vice sultan of Egypt in 1253. By now, the Mamluks had revolted against their masters and established their own sultanate, becoming the rulers of the land. Against all odds, the former
they were Turks, to use the broad term, essentially, too. Not even indigenous Egyptians.
Prince had made his way from slavery back to a royal position, but an easy life was not his destiny, and ghosts from his past would soon return to haunt him. Though Genghis Khan had died in 1227, his grandson Hulagu Khan had continued the Mongol expansion westward. Like demons, they had brought nothing but death and destruction to every land they touched. In the
Khwarezmian Empire was big, but then they go after the Abbasid Caliphate. They were the biggest ones of the Islamic dynasties here, and then keep going all the way west, all the way towards Egypt. It's pretty amazing how far they went.
Like demons, they had brought nothing but death and destruction.
The white skull thing was a thing they would do too, is pile the skulls. There was a story, I think, was it the Khwarezmian Empire, that the Mongols, before they defeated the Khwarezmian Empire, was waging war in China. And I think I remember the story. I think this was from Dan Carlin's Revenge of the Khans, whatever. I want to say it was like a Khwarezmian envoy or messenger or something was going to China. And he's like, whoa, why is there like this snowy hill? I don't remember that existing outside this Chinese city. And that's what he thought it was. And it said that then he got up there and saw that it was actually just a huge mound of white skulls that from a distance looked like a snowy hill. And this is when they were first learning about who the Mongols were. And it was like, holy crap.
To every land they touched. In 1254, they sacked the city of Baghdad and massacred all of its inhabitants, ending the Islamic Golden Age. Yeah. The Mongols then pushed into Syria and took the cities of Aleppo and Damascus.
Abbasid, or the fall of Abbasid Caliphate, but specifically Baghdad, is one of the biggest, most deadly sieges in actually all of human history. Especially when you look at like populations of what cities were. You know, they slaughtered probably 250,000 people in Baghdad, just everybody. I mean, the leadership there had basically surrendered the city, you know, hoping to spare the inhabitants, and the Mongols just wiped everybody out anyways. But yeah, probably the most famous mass slaughter they ever did. And like you said, ended the golden age of Islam. Baghdad was that intellectual center. Baghdad House of Wisdom was destroyed, and said they throw in books in the Euphrates or Tigris. Which one is Baghdad on? That you know, so much that the river ran black with ink from the scrolls.
The Ayyubid Sultan sends word to Egypt, pleading for help against the Mongols, and Qutuz is haunted by the memories of the destruction of his homeland. He knows the horrors the horde from the east will bring, and if the Mamluks are to have any chance of survival, Egypt must have strong leadership. He deposes the young and inexperienced sultan and takes the throne for himself. As if on cue, Hulagu Khan's diplomats soon arrive in Cairo, and they begin to read a very Mongol-sounding message to the new sultan.
Submit or die.
From the king of kings of the east and west, the great Khan, to Qutuz the Mamluk, who fled to escape our swords. You should think of what happened to other countries and submit to us. You have heard how we have conquered a vast empire and have purified the earth of the disorders that tainted it. We have conquered vast areas, massacring all the people. You cannot escape from the terror of our armies. Where can you flee? What road will you use to escape us? Our horses are swift, our arrows sharp, our swords like thunderbolts, our hearts as hard as the mountains. Our soldiers as numerous as the sand. Fortresses will not detain us, nor armies stop us. Your prayers to God will not avail against us. We are not moved by tears nor touched by lamentations. Only those who beg for our protection will be safe. Hasten your reply before the fire of war is kindled.
Dude, the Mongols were so good at writing these intimidation submission letters, and it was basically what it was. It was submit or die. But now they're like, hey, but you know what happens. You witnessed this as a child. Your entire civilization got evaporated. This story ends a little bit different, though.
Resist, and you will suffer the most terrible catastrophes. We will shatter your mosques and reveal the weakness of your god, and then we will kill your children and your old men together. At present, you are the only enemy against whom we have to march. As the messenger speaks his final words, the Mamluk advisors are literally
the Mongols were all over the place. They were actually stretched very thin by the time they get here towards Syria.
Shaking in fear. Qutuz looks to his officials and his blood begins to boil.
Shaken.
He calls for counsel away from the Mongol diplomats, and in private, the Sultan begins an impassioned plea to the council. You all have lived good lives funded by the taxes of the people, and now you wish to abandon them? Qutuz continues to argue with those who wish to flee, and his voice begins to quiver with desperation. Finally, he looks to his advisors as tears begin to stream down his cheeks. My brothers, who will defend Islam if not us? The Mongols had taken everything from him as a child.
I mean, they had destroyed the Islamic world. It was the end of the unification of an Islamic world. Their whole chain-backed Muhammad ended up ending.
He could not let them do it again. The generals...
Now, interestingly, a lot of Mongols actually ended up converting to Islam when they established the Ilkhanate in Persia, by the way. A lot of them.
Everything from him as a child. He could not let them do it again. The generals and nobles are moved by his words, and despite knowing they would most likely be accepting their own deaths with the decision, they agree to follow him into battle. With that, Qutuz and his men solemnly return to the Mongol messengers. The Sultan looks towards his guests and calmly gives a signal. His soldiers step forward and slice the diplomats in half. Their heads are removed and hung from the south gates of Cairo as an open act of defiance.
Can we just in history, it's like every culture you go to, cutting people's heads off and then parading them around or posting them publicly. Can we stop that, please? Please. I know it's a form of psychological manipulation, but come on.
A letter is sent to Hulagu notifying the Mongols that the Mamluks will not bow down and will instead fight to the end. Qutuz is soon joined by a rival Mamluk general named Baybars, a man who was also sold into slavery as a child by the Mongols, and they quickly begin to raise an army and set out to confront the enemy from the east. The Mamluks cobble together 24,000 men, but they are vastly outnumbered by the Mongols, nearly 3-1. It looks like this will be another trademark Mongol Muslim massacre, but fate intervenes when the great Khan Monka dies. Hulagu is forced to return to his homeland to help decide on the successor, and takes most of his army with him.
This similarly happens in Europe as well, right? In Europe, they are plowing into Central Europe, messing with the Hungarians and going all the way towards the Holy Roman Empire. By the way, did a video of this on the Originals channel, Mr. Tay Originals. One of the favorite videos I think we've ever made is about the Mongol War in Europe, and I think you'll like it. Go check it out. It's really good, I think.
He leaves his trusted general, Kitbuka, with around 12,000 warriors to finish the job. Kitbuka had recently converted to Christianity, so he recruits some Christian soldiers from Armenia and Georgia to bulk up his army, and then begins preparations to invade Egypt.
That's quite the thing to do, by the way. I mean, we're still in the shadows of the Crusades here, right? There's plenty of hostility there. In fact, Christians, like the Pope, and Christians in Eastern Europe, when the Mongols were first kind of, getting on the scene, they actually told the Mongols basically around the Crusade era, like, hey, let's team up against the Muslims. And I think they were, of course, like, yeah, you should convert to Christianity. And the response was so Mongol. It was basically, oh, you want us to like convert to Christianity and attack the Muslims? No. And because you said that, you now have to obey us. You have to submit to us, or we're going to raise all the lands of Christianity. They're like, Mongols like, we do not care about everyone's religions. Because that was their thing too. They didn't have religious policy like that. Like, we don't care. Oh, he wants to fight Muslims? Or like, we think of you as the same people.
Qutuz gets word that Hulagu had left the area, and he and Baybars immediately ride out to force a battle with Kitbuka.
Vicious horses.
They find the Mongols camped near a spring called Ain Jalut in Galilee. Baybars had spent time in the area as a fugitive and was familiar with the terrain, and he comes up with a battle plan to use the Mongols' own tactics against them. The bulk of the Mamluk army, commanded by Qutuz, is left hiding in the trees, and Baybars takes a small detachment to directly attack the Mongols. Baybars and his men charge the Mongol camp and harass them for hours with hit-and-run tactics. Every time the Mongols run out to fight, the Mamluks pull back closer and closer to Qutuz. Eventually, Kitbuka grows frustrated and he orders a full charge.
Now, what the Mongols would do too is, well, they would do this on horseback, right? They especially want to get people out of their fortifications, their, walled cities and that. So they'd come, with a force and like be fighting on the outskirts, and then be like, we got to retreat. And then they would go and slowly start leaving. So, and make it think like, they're very vulnerable. And then the enemy would come out, attack them, and they would go out and then end up splitting their forces and then circling right back. Now they've drawn them away for their fortifications, call them feigned retreats or fake retreats, and then encircle them. And they would do this so well coordinated that it worked in numerous instances in Mongol history.
This is exactly what Baybars had been waiting for, and he quickly orders his warriors to fall back. The Mongols, now enraged the Mamluks are again running away, blindly chase them, and Baybars and his men lead them directly to Qutuz. The trap had been set, and the Sultan gives the order. Qutuz's army emerges from the forest, and archers send a storm of arrows down onto the unsuspecting Mongol riders. The Mamluk heavy cavalry then makes a full charge and smash directly into the enemy line. Kitbuka and his warriors are initially shocked by this surprise attack, but they quickly regain their composure and begin fighting back. The battle is brutal, and the Mongols quickly prove that their reputation was well earned as they begin to savagely tear through the Mamluk army. Qutuz watches from a distance as his left flank begins to falter, and it appears that the Mongol forces are about to break through. His mind is flooded with memories of his childhood. He cannot let history repeat itself, and so, without a moment's hesitation, Qutuz abandons his post and charges headfirst into battle. As he rides, he throws off his helmet and shouts, "O Islam, O Allah, grant your servant Qutuz a victory against these Mongols."
You hear the stories about how the Mongols would basically play into these ideas that, like, the Mongols were like an antichrist, right? They were sent by God to kill people. They would double down on that. The famous quote from Genghis Khan is, yes, I am the punishment of God. If you and your people had not committed great sins, he would not have sent a punishment like me upon you. He said that, just kind of doubling down. It's like, oh, these people think I'm some like, some like prophecy, some kind of plague. He's like, yeah, well, I can be that. Loves that. Loves being the villain.
His warriors turn to see who is shouting and are shocked to see their sultan riding into battle to fight alongside them. Qutuz continues to charge forward. "O Islam!" He screams, and his words fill the Mamluks with renewed courage. They regain their composure and they begin to fight back. The battle rages on, with Qutuz now on the front lines.
This is totally one of those narratives of people that wrote it. You know what I mean? Like, you would not have seen this in the Mongol record of this type of imagery. And then, there's a saying, and then he comes out gallantly and then rallies the people. Those are always stories written by victors afterward,
And they begin to fight back. The battle rages on, with Qutuz now on the front lines, and soon the Mongols do something they had never done before. They begin to run in fear. Kitbuka cannot believe his eyes as his warriors flee past
can tell
him. He tries to rally his remaining men, but it is no use. Right? The Mongol general and those who stayed to fight are all slain in battle. Hulagu Khan receives word of the Mongol defeat at Ain Jalut and is enraged. He orders the execution of the last of his Ayyubid prisoners, but the damage had already been done. The illusion of the Mongol invincibility had been shattered.
Each of the stories of where the Mongols had spread, like up until like what their last point was, are all fascinating ones. In Europe, they were rolling over people, and then again they had to pull the Mongol leaders back to Karakoram because the Khan dies, and you got to go back and do the voting, like the election for the next Khans. And that stopped their push there. Famous story of them going over to Japan, right? They construct this navy, do this big amphibious invasion, and then storms come and destroy the ships. And basically the Mongols have to call it off. In fact, they come back later, about a decade later, same thing happens. They struggled down in the jungles of Southeast Asia when, their horses and their tactics didn't work very well in places like around like Vietnam, so they could stop there. But then, you can see like in battles like Ain Jalut, all had some kind of crazy, interesting ending. But when you look at it, you're talking about the largest conquered empire in history.
5 days after the Battle of Ain Jalut, Qutuz and Baybars retake Damascus, and within a month, they also free Aleppo from Mongol control. 2 men who had been sold into slavery as children by the Mongols had pulled off what no one had ever dreamed possible. They had stopped the unstoppable horde from the east, avenged the Khwarezmian Empire, and saved the Muslim and Christian world. Throughout the following decades, the Mongols would attempt multiple invasions into Syria, but would be pushed back time and time again, until eventually the descendants of Hulagu themselves eventually converted to Islam. If you can't beat them, join them, I guess.
They did. It's the place that they assimilated the most of all of them. China, they kind of kept quite a distinction between them. They would actually forbid some things. But yeah, they just kind of blended right in, essentially. The Ilkhanate, which is what they kind of set up in around the Persian world especially. They basically just used the pre-existing institutions because they liked, like Persian administration and how they did taxing and organization, and then just blended in, essentially. Intermarried with the people there, adopted Islam. Kind of became seamlessly now into the whole gene pool, where again, in other places, they had a little bit more distinctions.
For Qutuz, as epic as his story is, it ends on kind of a down note. As his army was riding back to Cairo to celebrate their victory at Ain Jalut, he was assassinated by a group of his own soldiers, probably under the orders of Baybars himself. What? Don't hate the player, hate the game.
All right, that was some really awesome, fun storytelling. Those stories, I didn't know to those details. About the Ain Jalut one, I did not know, actually, that it was led by somebody, from the Khwarezmian Empire who had witnessed that, which kind of makes it make more sense when you have the leadership or people that have actually experienced the Mongols, when it gave them extra motivation to actually, like, defend themselves. You wonder if those two hadn't survived the Khwarezmian, invasion, what that would have done to the Mamluks and the Egyptians when they show up, when the Mongols show up. Would they have, given up? Would they've had the motivation to fight back or that kind of thing? Would they have given up or just been outright slaughtered? So you can see why in so many cases the Mongols did want to kill off remaining, connections to old, systems and old governments and old societies from their leadership to, stop any kind of, new claim to power, I guess. Anyway, that was great. What'd you guys think of it? What are some other good revenge stories you think we should be talking about? Let us know down below. We'll see you next time. Bye.